Let me ask you something. And I want you to sit with this question for a moment before you answer it. How many days have you told yourself that tomorrow will be different? How many Monday mornings have you started with fire in your chest, absolutely certain that this time it would stick? And how many times has that fire died quietly by Wednesday, replaced by the same old habits, the same old excuses, the same old version of you sitting in the same old place wondering why nothing ever seems to change? Here's the truth. The problem has never been your goals. It has never been your circumstances. It has never been the time, the money, the opportunity, or the people around you. The problem, the real problem, is that most people are trying to change their lives without ever changing themselves. And that is the lesson I want you to carry from everything I am about to say. Discipline is not a habit. Discipline is not a routine. Discipline is not a 30-day challenge or a morning ritual or a productivity system. Discipline is an identity. It is who you decide to become. And until you change who you are on the inside, nothing on the outside will hold. Now I know that sounds simple. Maybe too simple. But stay with me, because what I am about to walk you through is something most people spend their entire lives circling around without ever landing on. Think about the people you know who are truly disciplined. Not the ones who talk about it. Not the ones who post about their routines online. The real ones. The ones who show up every single day, quietly, without applause, without motivation, without anyone watching. Have you noticed something about them? They do not seem to be fighting themselves. They do not seem to be white-knuckling their way through life. There is a kind of ease to the way they operate, even when they are doing hard things. And that ease is not talent. It is not some gift they were born with. It is the result of something very specific that Jim Rohn understood better than almost anyone who ever spoke about success. It is the result of a person who decided, truly decided, who they were going to be. You see, most people treat self-discipline like a wall they have to climb every morning. They wake up and the negotiation begins immediately. Should I work out or sleep in? Should I do the hard task first or check my phone? Should I eat well today or just start again on Monday? And every single day becomes a battle. And battles are exhausting. And exhausted people eventually surrender. And then they blame themselves. And that shame becomes another layer of weight they carry into tomorrow, making the next battle even harder to win. Jim Rohn said something that I want you to think about very carefully. He said that the pain of discipline weighs ounces, but the pain of regret weighs tons. Read that again. Not pounds. Tons. Because regret does not just hurt in the moment. Regret compounds. It accumulates. It sits inside you like sediment, layer after layer, year after year, until one day you look in the mirror and you see not who you became, but the shadow of who you could have been. And that is a weight that no motivation, no speech, no new planner or productivity app can lift from you. There was a man I once heard about. He was in his late 30s, successful by most measures. He had a good job, a decent home, a family that loved him. But he had this feeling he could never shake. A feeling that he was living a smaller life than he was capable of. Every year he would make promises to himself. He would start the business. He would write the book. He would get healthy. He would be more present. And every year the promise would dissolve into distraction, into busyness, into the comfortable routine of a life that demanded nothing extraordinary from him. One evening his daughter came to him with a school project. She had to write about someone she admired. Someone disciplined. Someone consistent. Someone who showed her what it meant to keep going even when it was hard. She had not written about him. Not because she did not love him. But because when she thought about discipline, when she thought about someone who did what they said they would do, his face did not come to mind. That moment did not destroy him. But it cracked something open. And through that crack, for the first time in years, he saw himself clearly. That story is not about shame. I am not telling it to make you feel bad. I am telling it because that crack, that moment of honest self-seeing, is exactly where real change begins. Not in motivation. not in excitement. In honesty. Jim Rohn's first step in building self-discipline was not about habits or systems or schedules. It was about philosophy. He believed that how you think about your life determines how you live it. And most people have a philosophy they have never examined. They believe, somewhere deep beneath their words, that they are the kind of person that things happen to. Not the kind of person who makes things happen. They believe that their consistency depends on how they feel. That their effort depends on their motivation. That their results depend on their circumstances. And as long as you believe that, you are giving away your power to something that was never in control to begin with. Because motivation is a visitor. It comes when it wants and leaves without warning. You cannot build a life around a visitor. You build a life around a decision. Now understand this. A decision is not a feeling. A decision is not enthusiasm. A decision is a line you draw in your own mind, quietly, without ceremony, and then you live on the right side of that line every day. Not perfectly. Not without difficulty. But consistently. And consistency, done long enough, becomes character. And character is identity. And identity is the foundation of everything. Ask yourself this honestly. Who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when you are tired and the task is boring and the results are nowhere in sight? Who are you in that moment? Because that is the truest answer to the question of who you are. Not the best version of yourself that shows up when the stakes are high and the energy is good. But the ordinary Tuesday version. The gray and unremarkable Wednesday version. That is the person doing the real building of your life. And that person, the Tuesday version of you, is the one that discipline is built for. There is a young woman I think about sometimes. She wanted to become a writer. She had real talent. People who read her work told her so. But she could never seem to finish anything. She would start with tremendous energy, write for a few days, and then the voice in her head would begin. Who are you to write this? No one will care. You are not good enough yet. And she would stop. Not because the work was too hard. Because the identity did not match the action. She did not see herself as a writer. She saw herself as someone who wanted to write. And that is an enormous difference. A person who wants to write waits for inspiration. A writer writes. She eventually understood this. And the day she stopped waiting to feel like a writer and simply began showing up to the page every morning, everything shifted. Not the talent. The identity. The work followed. This is what Jim Rohn meant when he talked about working harder on yourself than you do on your job. Not self-improvement in the shallow sense of positive affirmations and morning routines. But the deep and ongoing project of becoming someone whose identity is aligned with the life they want to build. Because when who you are and what you want are aligned, discipline is not an effort. It is an expression. The second thing Rohn understood is that most people underestimate the power of small daily actions. Not because they do not know that small things add up. They know it intellectually. But they do not feel it. They do not feel it because small things do not give you feedback quickly enough for your emotions to register progress. You work out once and you still feel the same. You eat well for a day and the mirror has not changed. You read for 30 minutes and you are not visibly smarter. And so the brain, which is always running a cost-benefit calculation, says this is not working. Let's stop. And most people listen to that voice. Most people treat the absence of visible progress as evidence that progress is not happening. But here is what they do not understand. Every single action you take that is aligned with who you want to become is laying a brick. You may not see the wall yet, but the wall is being built. And the morning you finally see it is not the morning it appeared. It is the morning you finally looked up long enough to notice what has been growing all along. Think about it this way. A river does not carve a canyon overnight. But given enough time, flowing water cuts through solid rock. Not because the water is more powerful than the rock, but because the water is consistent. You do not have to be exceptional. You have to be consistent. Over and over and over again. That is the quiet truth. Most motivational content never sits with long enough. Because it is not exciting. It is not dramatic. It does not make a good highlight reel. But it is the truth that changes lives. Jim Rohn also spoke about environment and the people we surround ourselves with. He said that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Now people hear that and they think it is about cutting off negative friends or finding rich mentors. But it goes deeper than that. Your environment does not just affect your mood. It shapes your standards. It shapes what you consider normal. It shapes what you think is possible. And when your standard of normal is low, discipline feels like an extreme effort because you are always swimming against the current of what surrounds you. But when you deliberately raise your environment, when you choose what you read, what you watch, who you listen to, who you spend your evenings with, the current shifts. And what once required enormous effort begins to feel like the natural direction of your life. There was a businessman who spent years surrounding himself with people who complained about the economy, about luck, about how the system was rigged. And he found himself thinking the same thoughts, using the same language, carrying the same hopelessness. He was not a negative person by nature. But his environment had slowly recalibrated what felt real to him. One year he made a deliberate choice. He stopped attending the gatherings where complaining was the main event. He started reading the words of people who had built things despite difficulty. He found one person in his life who operated with genuine discipline, and he paid close attention to how that person thought. Within 6 months he had not learned any new strategies. He had not attended any seminars. He had simply changed what was flowing into his mind every day. And his life began to change direction without him even pushing very hard. You see, self-discipline is not just about what you do. It is about what you allow in. Every piece of content you consume, every conversation you participate in, every environment you put yourself in is either building the person you want to become or quietly tearing them down. There is no neutral territory. You are always being shaped by something. The only question is whether you are choosing what shapes you or simply accepting whatever arrives. The next piece of what Jim Rohn taught, and this one is deeply important, is the idea of keeping promises to yourself. This sounds almost too simple to be profound. But think about the relationship you have with yourself right now. How many times have you told yourself you would do something and then did not do it? How many times have you set an alarm and turned it off? Made a commitment and broken it quietly before dinner? And every single one of those moments, no matter how small it seemed, was a vote. A vote that told your deeper self that your word means nothing. That you are not to be trusted. And over time, the accumulation of broken self-promises builds a prison made entirely of your own hands. A prison of low self-belief. A prison where starting feels pointless because deep down you already know you will quit. The way out is not dramatic. It does not require an enormous leap. It requires a very small, very specific practice. Start by making one promise to yourself today that you can absolutely keep. Not a big one. A small one. Something so achievable that failure would require effort. And then keep it. Then tomorrow, keep another one. Then another. Not because the actions themselves are world-changing, but because each kept promise is a vote for the new identity. Each one says, I am someone who does what I say. And as that identity grows, bigger promises become possible. Not because you found more motivation. Because you became someone different. Jim Rohn also spoke about the discipline of learning. He read daily. Not because he needed information. Because he believed that a person who stops learning stops growing, and a person who stops growing starts dying inside. And I think about how rare that is. Real learning. Not consuming. Not scrolling. Not absorbing other people's opinions like weather. But sitting down with a real idea, wrestling with it, letting it challenge you, letting it change the way you see things. Most people learn what they need to function and then they stop. They build a mental model of the world in their 20s and then spend the rest of their lives defending it. And the world moves on without them. And they wonder why they feel stuck. Discipline of the mind is as important as discipline of the body. Because your mind is the architect of everything. Every action you take, every habit you build, every relationship you navigate, every decision you make, all of it comes from the mind. And if the mind is not being intentionally cultivated, it will be shaped by accident. By whatever is loudest, most frequent, most emotionally stimulating in your environment. And that is a terrifying way to live when you think about it. To have the most powerful tool you possess operating entirely on autopilot, being programmed by whoever shouts the loudest. Ask yourself, when was the last time you deliberately chose what went into your mind? Not just what to eat or what to wear or where to go, but what ideas to sit with, what voices to listen to, what kind of thinking to practice. That is where real discipline lives. Not just in the body. In the mind. The final thread of what Jim Rohn wove through everything he ever taught was this. He believed in the power of taking personal responsibility to a level most people find uncomfortable. Not blame. Not shame. Responsibility. There is a deep difference. Blame looks backward and creates suffering. Responsibility looks forward and creates power. When you take full responsibility, not for everything that happened to you, but for what you do next, something shifts. You stop waiting for permission. You stop waiting for conditions to be perfect. You stop waiting for the right moment, the right feeling, the right sign. You simply begin. Because you understand that waiting is a choice. And choosing to wait is choosing the life you have right now. Most people never realize how much of their life is a series of passive choices. Choices made by default. Choices made by inaction. Choosing not to change is a choice. Choosing not to speak is a choice. Choosing not to start is a choice. And those choices compound just as powerfully as the active ones. The question is simply which direction they are compounding in. There is something I want to leave you with. And I want you to feel this, not just understand it. There are two versions of you. They both exist right now, in this moment. One version keeps reading about change and never making it. Keeps planning and never beginning. Keeps waiting for the perfect conditions, the perfect mood, the perfect month to finally be different. That version is not a failure. That version is simply someone who has not yet made the decision. And that version will continue to exist indefinitely, as long as it is allowed to. The other version gets up tomorrow and does one small thing differently. Not everything. Not a complete overhaul of life. Just one honest step in a better direction. And then does it again the next day. And the day after that. Not because it is easy. Not because motivation is there every morning. But because that version has decided who it is. And who it is does not negotiate on the small things. Because the small things are not small. The small things are the architecture of the entire life. Jim Rohn said that success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. And failure is nothing more than a few errors in judgment repeated every day. The difference between the two paths is so thin you can barely see it in a single day. But across a month, a year, a decade, the distance between them is the distance between two entirely different lives. You have been carrying something for a long time. A sense that you are capable of more than this. A quiet knowing that the life you are living is a smaller version of the life you could be building. I know you have felt it. Most people feel it. The tragedy is not feeling it. The tragedy is letting it remain a feeling instead of letting it become a decision. The discipline you are looking for is not going to arrive when you are ready. It is not going to wait for the right season of life or the perfect set of circumstances. It is available to you right now. In this moment. In the choice of what you do in the next hour and the hour after that. You do not need 30 days to change your life. You need one moment of real decision. The 30 days are just the proof of it. There is a version of you that keeps waiting. And there is a version of you that finally decides. One stays where it has always been. The other builds something real. The choice has always been yours. It still is.